Journalist, and I cover science and society, and it's a great honor to be here to discuss Upasana's debut, Unruly, the Ig Nobel Prizes and the Science That Refuses to Behave. And if you have a lot of questions about what that means, we'll start with one paragraph, one page of her book, which kind of illustrate how funny, brilliant, and insightful science that looks like it's for students or just professors can be in an everyday life. Speaking of modern challenges, let's talk about those tangled earphones you wrestled with this morning. They are part of a larger phenomenon that scientists have long been curious about. Why do strings and chords always seem to get knotted up, no matter how carefully we put them away? Knot theory, a branch of mathematics and physics, delves into the seemingly simple act of your earphones, hair, or threads tangling up. In 2008, researchers Dorian Raymer and Douglas Smith were awarded the Ig Nobel Prize in Physics for their study on the spontaneous knotting of agitated strings. Their work showed that when a string or your earphones is placed in a container and shaken, it almost inevitably forms knots. The probability of knot formation increases with the length of the string and the duration of the agitation. So it's not just you being sloppy, it's science. And a lot of us seem to think that science is either for, something that we finish in school or college and then we don't have to turn back to. And this is what this book really challenges. So I'm delighted that Upasana is here today with us. When I asked her for an introduction, Upasana sent me this very funny paragraph where she said that Upasana is an Indian science writer who escaped a former life in biotechnology. She was awarded the country's first fellowship for science books and studied science writing from Johns Hopkins University. She loves animals, humid weather, and comfortable sandals. She can poorly mimic many creatures, including squirrels and sea lions. For reasons unrelated, she made numerous visits to the local police station. Unruly is her debut novel, so welcome Upasana. And with us is also Kollegala Sharma, who is a science writer and journalist. He's very familiar with those who live in Mysuru. He's written over 4,000 articles, 900 podcasts, all on science and communicating science that is an accessible way to people. He's an award-winning author with over 12 books penned by him. So welcome both of you. So, going back to the knot theory, Upasana, I want to ask you what made you write about science. What does it mean when science refuses to behave? And where did you first get the inspiration to write about the Ig Nobels? But before that, just to introduce also the character of this book, which is the Ig Nobel Prizes. A lot of you have heard about the Nobel Prizes. It's something we are familiar with. They are prestigious. And if you're wondering if the Ig Nobels are something that's for bad science, you're wrong. If you think it's like the awards, the Razzie Awards of the academic world, if you are familiar with films, the Razzie Awards are given to bad films every year, like horrible films you can't sit through. This is not that either. Ig Nobel Prizes are actually something that is looked up in the science and academic world as science that makes you laugh first and then think. So things like this knotting of your headphones, which seems so mundane and bizarre and maybe stupid to some people, like why should we care, goes on to then explain how the DNA works. Science can come from the simple science of how a knotted headphone, how do headphones knot. So going back to what the Ig Nobels mean, they sound absurd, but they really have a larger context, and they really intend to make science fun and accessible to people. So over to you, Upasana. Why did you think of writing this book, which is not just a work, one of the first works which goes into the history and how the Ig Nobels are given out and what are the various studies that they have done since 1991, but also uses it as a mechanism to talk about Indian science.
Thank you for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be sharing the stage with both of you. Hello everyone, namaskara. Thank you for waving back. I'm Upasana. Why did I write about knots in this book? Because I have longish hair and it's a pain to get it to listen to me every morning. Turns out there's science behind that. There's physics behind that. It doesn't help me get through the knots any faster, but now I have an appreciation for the difficulty of the job. There's science living on my skull. And similarly, if you go in more into the chapter that has details of this knot theory, you'll find that there's science in every aspect of a boring Sunday morning, science in the way your cereal gets soggy in milk, science in the way buttered toast always falls buttered side down, science in the way you walk while holding a full cup of coffee so carefully so as to not let it spill. There's physics in that cup of coffee, in the way the liquid swirls and the way you manipulate the cup to make sure not a drop spills. And if you enjoy fruit, there is science in the way banana peels are prone to making you slip and fall in a wonderfully comical fashion. I started writing this book because I got this fellowship to write a book and I had no other ideas. But also because I felt a kinship with all the weird people who look at everyday things that are overlooked by most of us regular, sensible people who have careers and families and taxes to pay. I felt like I wanted something to do with these wonderful people who not only have these strange ideas that come to us, but follow through on them. There's funding involved, there's planning involved, there's years and years of academic research involved in seeing through that first seed of curiosity about why does that light glare at my face in that particular way, and would it be better if I took my glasses off right now? There is a great deal to understand once you pull back the layers of pretty much any subject and you open your mind to the possibility of falling in love with ideas. And the book came from a very sincere and true place, and I often refer to the book, even in the jacket description, as my love letter to weird science and weirder scientists.
Thank you, Upasana. Sharma ji, you have written about science for over 4 decades now. So what is it that you've experienced while writing about mostly Indian science and scientists, and what is the space for this unruliness where we can talk about banana peels as award-winning science? Just to kind of spoiler alert, like the banana peel science is an actual thing that won an award, and for physics, I think, and what they found out also was the gel that is produced from the peel touching the floor, and which makes you slip, is also the kind of substance that's there between your joints that make your joints function the way they function. It's similar. So there are various interesting and weird ways in which this book kind of brings together these things. And in your work, you've probably come across serious scientists and mad scientists. So what do you...
Well, science for most of the people is very serious. So whenever I say that I am a science writer, oh, do you write for children? So that's the first expression that comes. And when I say, no, I don't write for children, I write for everyone, then they say that science is for children. It's for the classrooms and nothing else. And this impression, this idea is not just, like she says, for all the serious people, but generally this is what people think about science. And even scientists. I remember in 1991, the Ig Nobel started. But before that, I had joined Science Reporter in 1990. After 1 year, the Ig Nobel started. Not because of me, of course. People laugh at me because I look very serious and humorless. But that is a different aspect. What happened at that time was, we were preparing a special issue of Science Reporter. And I approached the topmost scientists in India, asking them to give an anecdote, a humorous anecdote in their life. And the answers I got was very serious. Somebody actually wrote me a very nasty letter saying that, how do you think that science is humorful? So it is very serious business. We don't have any humor in that. And the person is a fantastic entrepreneur today. with a huge chemical industry in his name. There was another instance when a scientist, because we think that the scientists are all know people, that doesn't happen. There was an interview on the Doordarshan, a topmost scientist again, and the interviewer asked them, it was a chit-chat, okay, not about his work, it was about the person. So you are a plastic engineer, and what do you think about plastic surgery? And the fellow said, I don't know about that, but probably it is something has to do with plastic, and therefore that is called plastic surgery. And that was a jnanodaya for me to say that scientists are not all know people. And from that day onwards, I started tracking what's happening in the Journal of Irreproducible Research and Journal of Improbable Research. These are the two journals which, like in Kannada, we have Koravanji. And now I think Aparanji. These are two humor magazines. And we had Punch also in English. And these were specifically restricted to science. There's nothing other than science that was there. And I used to go to British Council Library in Delhi only to read these journals because they were not so easily accessible. But thanks to internet today, we have Ignoble everywhere, and Upasana is sitting next to me here and with a beautiful book. It's this attitude that science has to be always serious, which makes us a little, I think that I'm very happy to see so many people sitting here to talk, listen to your science book. But otherwise, if you had titled it as a science session, probably we would have seen only a few people, except you and me. Yeah. Okay. But it's good that we have people here. Science is many times laughing matter because it has to do with questions. And the questions are never serious. They are silly, stupid, and simple. But the answers will be different. Okay. You are talking about the knots. Okay. And one of the most interesting thing about that, the previous research that talked about knots was, why does your shoelace doesn't stay tied?
I have the same problem.
So it's a simple, everyday experience. But then they came out with this series of formula and other things which I cannot understand. But what I could understand was that, okay, the same problem what I have, the scientists also have. They can't tie their shoes.
Yeah. What is it that we as a nation pride ourselves on, like pushing students into the science stream? There are so many scientists and engineers and everything to do with science all around us, doctors all around us. But what is it that we have done that has taken the joy, the curiosity, and the wonder out of the science and made it into something that's like a means to the end, which is our paycheck? So what do you think have, in your experience while writing this book and researching this book, made for great conditions for this curiosity?
Curiosity in myself or in the people I studied?
In the people you study, and of course yourself.
So I will say there's one thing in common with everybody profiled and featured and interviewed in this book. It's that they cannot help but be themselves. They cannot help but stick to their circumstances or the framework they're in. Even in severe, serious academia, there are people who remember the joy of curiosity, who remember that time in science class when the eclipse was explained as being just a shadow, and that moment of wonder they felt, thinking about the shadow that I make on the ground with my hand, that's the same shadow on the entire planet, on the moon. Is that what's happening? That moment of wonder never really goes away if you remember to hold on to it. All that changes is what it is that's new to you. You seek the greater and greater unknown questions. And a lot of these individuals whom I admire so greatly faced a great deal of negativity and repercussions for being brave enough to follow their curiosity. That was something I found inspiring myself, because how many times have we been in scenarios where it seemed as if everything was against us, we're being weighed down by expectations and pressure and an expectation to be just like everybody else, to listen to orders, to forget about what you enjoy about studying in school and focus more on what will get you marks, or like you said, what will get you a good job. It takes a certain kind of courage and tenacity to be humorous, even as an adult. And that courage and that tenacity is often overlooked, like Sharma ji was saying. Many scientists who walk off the beaten path are looked down upon by their own community, by academia, right? So they're ostracized, they're shunned, they're not considered real scientists. Why? Because they're not working on real things like cancer or space or theoretical physics or the atom. But wasn't science just supposed to be about asking questions and a methodological approach to answering them? Isn't that all science is? And what tends to happen in my limited years of being alive, I've noticed, what tends to happen in schools, in classrooms, is this kind of unspoken categorization of students. You have the toppers who are very good at reproducing a definition from the textbook, and then you have those who are incapable of doing that. Immediately that comes with the baggage of whether you will be successful or not, whether you will make something of yourself or not. And consequently, the kind of attention provided by your teachers, the kind of support provided by your family is colored by how you perform in class, which is a very tragic thing. Because learning happens at different stages for different people. We have all kinds of learners. We have all kinds of minds. And I genuinely believe that every single human being is born with curiosity in them. And you as a new mother know better than anyone how curious babies, infants, and young children are. What is it about having to survive as an adult in society beats it out of us? What is it that we start to suppress it in ourselves because we believe that's the bad part of you, or that's the unhelpful part of you in a competitive world? So the book is as much about non-conforming and being individualistic as it is about learning to survive in a system that rewards sameness in any profession, and especially in academia, because that's what I happen to write about. Anything you'd like to add?
About the book or about?
No, about what is it that we have done to kill the curiosity in our exploration of science?
A lot of things. We first stop people from asking questions. The first, in the classroom, the moment a student gets up and asks a question, the thing that I say, sit down, I will answer later. Okay, but we never go back and then answer. So this is something that we always do. At home, when we don't have the answer, we say that don't ask silly questions. Okay, we never think that the questions are not silly. Questions are always there. And for a child especially, if for a curious mind, I would not say even child, any question is very serious. Right. Simply serious. Why does this happen? I must just tell you two things that happened in the last week. Okay, two research papers. One was about why do dog poop, okay, fall into a cone. Why not like a spring? Funny. But they did a serious research on that. And there was another one again about dog. Are dogs right-handed or left-handed? We all laugh, but those people who were doing the research, it was very serious for them because we don't know how to measure whether a dog is a left-handed or a right-handed dog. And for that, they designed a specific test to test whether a dog is really left-handed or we only perceive that. So these are some of the things. Why do we stop asking these kind of questions as we grow up?
Right.
Okay, like I said, maybe when we were talking about in the afternoon when we were having lunch, she suddenly said, my baby is crying, I have to go. And the baby was not to be seen somewhere here. It was somewhere there. But her mother instinct, I don't know whether it is the instinct or she has a special sense. I have to find out because my wife also does. In the middle of the night, she will wake up and she says that my daughter is saying something and let me just check up. And my daughter is 35 years. And this is the mother's instinct, or is there something, sixth perception, sense? I don't know. And you have to tell me. But if not, I would like to do some research on that.
Yeah. The work is ongoing.
Yeah. I must give you one example of how serious we all become, or how we become humorous in a science, this one. In Mysuru University, where I was a researcher for some time, I had a colleague, and he was doing research on bats. Bats, the animals, okay, the mammals which fly. And he purchased some bats, and he submitted the bill. The bill was bats. And the accounts department objected, saying, why do you need bats for biology research? So the next time he found a way out, he said, chiropterans. So now that's what makes the scientists to be very serious. You know, sometimes our system doesn't understand us. And probably he wrote chiropterans and it worked. And similarly, another thing happened with him was that he had to buy a torch, okay? A common torch, battery. And they said, no, you cannot buy. Then he had to put up a proposal saying that we need a portable illuminating device to go into the caves. It worked. So sometimes the system probably makes us serious, although we would like to laugh a lot while we do the serious research also.
Just an activity for everyone. I'm going to read out two studies, titles of two studies. One of them is actual science and one of them is not. So I want a show of hands after I read the studies for the first and the second one. So a preliminary survey of nose picking among adolescent sample. Is this a real study or not? 2 people, 3 people, 5, maybe 10 people think it's real. The relationship between jump height and time since the most recent bowel evacuation in humans. Real or not? Okay. And half the audience has not responded. So, among this, the first study, the nose picking among teenagers, is an actual study. And it was done by none other than Nimhan's professor, CA. Yeah. Yeah, 100K. And when you think it's absurd that he did this, that he studied teenagers who were picking their nose, and he got the 2001 Ig Nobel Prize for it for public health. And when he was asked why he did it, and you write about this, and he says that this is a common, obsessive behavior is very common in several kinds of mental health issues. It might be hair plucking, it might be pinching, and so is nose picking. And if we don't know what normal teenagers do, how much nose do they pick, how would we know how much a schizophrenic patient or another person with a mental illness does? So to define the normal, you have to do something absurd. There is also a fascinating study about how long mammals take to pee. And on average, it is all mammals take only 21 seconds to pee. So if you are in the toilet for longer, ask yourselves, what are you doing? So back to you, Upasana. What I like about this book is you not only write about the Ig Nobels and the various funny studies, you also bring in Indian science here. What made you do that? And why do you, and some of them are not Ig Nobel winners, but they have done interesting work. And every chapter you introduce us to a new scientist. So how did you go about marrying these two very different themes, honestly? Yeah.
I was shocked when I found out that many Ig Nobel Prize winners were Indians.
Are there more Ig Nobel Indian winners than Nobel winners?
Yeah. There are more Ig Nobel Indian winners than Nobel winners. And many of them are Indians, not Indians who happen to live and work elsewhere, which is a different kind of Indian. I was interested in finding out how these people could pursue a completely weird idea like that right here in our country. I've never in my lifetime seen a circumstance that was conducive to rigorous study of nose picking, ever, in the country. So I had to understand what was their secret, how did they manage, what did their colleagues say, what did their family say, what did their bosses say. So I went after many of them, and anyone who responded to my emails I interviewed, anyone who had time I interviewed. And then I realized that there is something very important I'm going to be able to say with this book, not just about the Nobel Prizes, which are documented well anyway, but there is something more interesting and important I might get to say, which is Indians are human beings. There are weird people among us, curious people among us, brave people among us, and a subsection of these are scientists. We have Indian scientists living among us worthy of just as much admiration and coverage and attention as any of the great minds of our time. It's not really about their scientific output, but about their scientific approach. What sort of questions are they picking? And how are they approaching the process of answering that question? So I ended up interviewing some non-Ig Nobel winning Indian scientists and engineers, including the first female director of an ISRO center, and somebody known as the Polar Woman of India, for being the first Indian woman to spend more than a year in Antarctica. Both of them engineers, not scientists, but they were and are mavericks. Firstly, for being female and achieving what they did, but also for choosing the path that they did. It's not just bravery and courage and feminism, it's also a stubbornness. It's also a childish stubbornness for following the thing that fascinates them. And the Polar Woman of India, Mangala Mani, did so in her, went to Antarctica and spent over a year at the pole in her 50s. And now, in her 60s, she's pursuing a PhD. And she's almost done with it. So congratulations to her. And I was jealous of people like Richard Feynman, who had their personal lives and their eccentricities so beautifully covered in stories and in pop culture. And I was angry that there was no equivalent from our country. And I thought, let's just look at some regular Indian scientists and see if there's anything interesting to say about them. And turns out there was a lot, enough to fill an entire book.
Do you want to?
Yeah. You have put it across very well in your book. Okay, I have written it down here. Basically, every chapter says why scientists do research. Okay. The why nothing in science ever only one thing. There's some reason for doing some research. Then it is not just living. It is not just deep. It's just vague. So any vague thing invites curiosity. How the world runs on strange passion projects you didn't know existed. So she talks about some projects about which, if we think that, and why are we spending so much of money on these projects? And why should we be spending money on this? And what comes out of that? Okay. So when I read these things, another Ig Nobel Prize came to my mind. Okay. I don't know how many of you are wearing this underwear. I don't want to name the brand. But it is an antibacterial underwear. Okay? When in, I think, somewhere around 1999 or 2000, a Japanese scientist actually laced all these cotton fibers with nanoparticles of silver. He called it as antibacterial fiber. And the idea was to have a self-cleaning underwear or self-cleaning socks. Okay, these two are very dirty objects for us. And this is already in the market. So it is not a humor that we are talking about. It is not a joke that we are talking about. It is something weird, okay? A question that is so weird, but that still is useful.
Yes. So when we are talking about these weird things that are useful, there are so many. For example, in 2023, I was in Colombia and I was reporting on a project where they were breeding mosquitoes in labs and then releasing them into neighborhoods because these lab-grown mosquitoes would fight dengue. So, and the way, I mean, at first thought, it just raises eyebrows. And you're like, why would you do that? We already have enough mosquitoes. And I also found out while reporting on it that Indian Council for Medical Research was already doing this work, but they didn't want to kind of operationalize it the way the World Mosquito Program has done in several countries. And when I asked them why, and they said, can you just imagine what problems this will create? Because people are going to think that the government is doing something wrong. And the people will not understand that there is science behind it. The science behind this is that the Aedes aegypti mosquito, which has the dengue virus, is in the lab infected with the Wolbachia bacteria. And basically, Wolbachia plus Aedes, dengue virus is equal to no dengue. So when it bites you, the lab-grown mosquitoes, they do not infect you. And when they kind of, and this is maternally passed, so when they kind of mate with other mosquitoes in the wild, in your local neighborhoods, those become ineffective as well for passing on the dengue virus. So this is it sounds complex, but it's very interesting, and it's lab grown, so it already has this kind of fear that we have. But what I understood was Colombians themselves were taking these mosquitoes in bottles and releasing them in the neighborhoods. So what is it about the science, that way we communicate, that makes it something that's we cannot engage with, we cannot understand, or we do not appreciate or welcome it?
I think I'm also a partner in the crime in the sense that when we talk about science or write about science, we don't bring in humor or make it a light subject for people to understand. Okay, this is something that I have to do. In Karnataka, I think I can talk about only one person, Palahalli Vishwanath, who brings humor into his this one. But most of us are always serious, at least not extremely serious, but we don't bring in a lot of humor into this, mainly because we think that bringing in humor, people might miss the context and the subject and the core point and take only the humor out. Recently we had a science theatre festival here, and we had a play which centered on a scientist, his scientific contributions, but it was a little humorous. And at the end, the reviewer said the humor took away everything that the scientist did. Okay, that's a perception that we have. But a lot of children liked that, and they actually understood what the scientist was doing. So probably it has to do with the way that we are grown up and we are closing ourselves from other experiences. That's something that I always wonder. Yes, we need to do a lot more. I have always wondered, I wish Bertie Ashley was here. Again, another Mysorean we should be very proud of. He's the only stand-up comedian doing science communication. So science communication with stand-up comedies. And I think we should have more of him in Mysuru. Yeah. These are the ways that we should be talking about. And talking about malaria itself, how did this name come about? The name came about because people at that time thought that a bad air brings all the disease, the malaria. And that's how the name came. But then the mosquitoes came later, much later. So maybe 40 years later, we discovered, and incidentally, Ronald Ross, again, an Indian citizen, British born, in British India, he discovered that the mosquitoes were the reasons for spreading the disease.
Yeah.
Okay, not the bad air. He asked this question, but it was all serious questions. So suppose we do the same thing, it becomes a different question. And in India, there's one more problem. Anything that is not associated with religion is serious.
So you think religion is funny?
At least religion will say that you accept it.
Yeah.
Okay, but the science you always counter.
Yeah. Upasana, you've done this successfully where you've brought in humor into your writing. There were parts where I was laughing. So what made, obviously the ignobles themselves lend to great humor and comic writing, but what is it, what was your process like? And after that, I'd like to open up for questions, yeah.
I kept writing until I wrote something that actually made me giggle at the computer. And that's how I knew it was good enough to stay. The bits that didn't make me giggle upon a second or third read were ruthlessly edited out. But the thing is, at the outset, I told myself this book is going to be a failure. So genuinely forget about the rules and let the book itself, the way it's structured, the language it uses, be an example of the Ig Nobel philosophy, where you're focusing on the core essence of some ideal, whether it's curiosity or humor or science communication, and you're not focusing on the presentation, which freed me up to do whatever the heck I wanted. And that's what I did with the book, whatever the heck I wanted. But it had to make sense and be cohesive enough to justify its presence in a reader's life. And that took work, that took some understanding of the craft, that took, again, a lot of revisiting and editing, and a lot of arguing with the editor. But the thing I kept coming back to was, if I'm not enjoying writing this, it's going to show, and nobody's going to enjoy reading it. So I tried to remind myself that it's a privilege to be in a position just to write about something you genuinely care about, and let it show. Let the vulnerability show, let the love show, let the silliness show, and and just be free.
Thank you, Upasana. I'd like to, yes, audience questions. There's a gentleman there's a mic coming, 1 second.
That was lovely, Upasana, and sir, this thing. I just wanted to, you said about the joys of curiosity. I wish your next book will be about that. And what rules would you kind of frame to maintain curiosity? See, being a scientist myself, I've retired now, and I still continue to be a scientist. But the point is, it's not an easy joke to carry on with curiosity, especially when you have a career, you have a responsibility, right? It's just like a doctor who outside his door, there are 600 patients, right? And he has to get through them by 1 o'clock in the afternoon before he runs for his ward rounds, right? Therefore, a scientist also, he begins his work with curiosity. But as you plod along, there are grant-giving agencies who dictate to you. There are scientific mafia which controls those, right? There are numerous problems. And you very aptly put it, when you wrote the book with freedom. You wrote the book with the joy that you felt, and that's why you are where you are now, right? And many, many scientists tried to do that. And we have to cloak it with something else. Okay, I'll give you an example. Like, there is a problem of getting funding for leprosy research. Okay? But there is money for tuberculosis research. So what do? So you cover up the leprosy research by claiming that you're doing tuberculosis research. And that's illegal by any of the grant-giving agencies. So I am looking forward to your next book, or maybe I can also help you do it, is to maintain curiosity against all great odds. It's very difficult.
Upasana,
and even when you talk to Nobel Prize winners, right, it's the same story. Thank you. I enjoyed the session.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir, for being here and for sharing your personal insights into the issue. I completely agree that there are some very practical and logistical burdens associated with being a free thinker in academia. And you do have to appease the grantors, the grant-making agencies and the funders in one way or another. There is no doubt about it. I will say, continuing the analogy of the doctor seeing many, many patients, I don't believe that a doctor can sacrifice rigor in order to be able to attend to his patients, but that does not mean his demeanor or attitude needs to be affected. Now, and that, in case of science, not to disagree with you, but just to add to what you've said, from having interviewed scientists who've been asked this very question, how do you do it? How do you keep this atmosphere alive in the lab? There's always some element of ritualistic fun added in the lab, almost always. And the second is sort of a give and take approach, where they do maybe 10 studies for the funders, one for themselves, a little one for themselves. Work 3 years for funding and work 1 year for whatever they want. So there's these little balancing acts that I've found scientists do, and I would certainly welcome sitting down with you and working on facing the practical challenges, especially in India. Yes. Yes, on keeping curiosity alive. Thank you very much.
Yes, please, the gentleman.
Don't you think that finally science is a child's play, and that all science actually refuses to behave? When you think about Newton, when you think about Einstein, Ramanujan, Évariste Galois for the set theory, you know what they have in common? They were children. They did their discoveries when they were less than 25.
Thank you. Yeah. Just one anecdote and then we'll wrap.
Yeah, to answer your question, sir, it's not an answer actually, and we have also gone through all these things. So when I was had to get a funding about a research which was about a mouse testis, I had to write that this will give the insights on how we can treat cancer in downtrodden children as per the 20-point program. That was 40 years ago. The 20-point program was there. But now probably we'll have to say that this is how the research will bring benefits to take Bharat to 2047.
So you have to speak the language of the grant-making agency is what he's saying.
This.
Yeah.
So we have to be innovative, but at the same time, like Upasana said, 10 projects we do in for the government and 1 project we do for ourselves. Otherwise, I cannot look at my shoe and try to do the shoelace work without funding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Upasana and Kollegala. Upasana will be outside if you have more questions, and her book is available at the stall there. Thank you again, MLF, for having us.
Thank you, Mahima.
While we clear the stage, the book, if you're not interested in science or humor or nonfiction, the book makes an excellent gift. So buy multiple copies, get them signed, which increases their value over time, right? And get on with your life. You'll be well loved in your circles.